Hi there. Thank you for joining in today. It's another little session. We are on Q2 and episode 2. We are looking at the topic, the Great Controversy, episode 2. Let's dive in. So, if you recall, last week we explored the beginning of the Great Controversy in heaven between good and evil, between God and the adversary. Now, up until this point, we were just chilling. We had nothing to do with any of that. But when Lucifer lost the battle, and with it his place in heaven, this dude came down with great rage. And now the object of his attack is the crown jewel of God's creation, man. And that's where we're coming. Before we proceed any further, it might be nice to know what exactly we're dealing with. So let's just read Revelation 12, verse 12. And it reads, "Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea." Why? Well, because the devil has gone down to you and is filled with fury because he knows that his time is short. Verse 17. Then the dragon was enraged at the woman, and he went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep God's commandments and hold fast to the testimony of Jesus. Interesting. 1 Peter 5 verse 8 says, "Be alert and of sober mind." Why? Well, because your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Now, this text seems to suggest that this guy is not playing at all. For as many as identify with God, by implication, they have taken sides in this great controversy, and the adversary has placed a mark on their backs 247 to deceive and to destroy. Should we be worried? Let's find out. Psalms 46 verse 1, and it reads, "God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble." Isaiah 41 verse 10, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Now, on the other hand, God has placed his hedge of protection round and about us. We can rest assured knowing that Satan only operates within the confines of God's permission, so we are safe. Now, point is, this controversy has now progressed from the stage in heaven to our individual lives here, meaning we are under attack, and it's a 247 assault. So, permit me digress just a little bit. Now, if we are under attack 247, chances are that we will not always get it right. We'll make mistakes. Now, if that's the case, how then should we treat our brothers and sisters, especially when they fall? A. Tear him down the more with our words and attitude, or B. Encourage them to get up, back on their feet, and fight on? Before you answer, think again. How well does your answer tally with your record thus far? Beyond your beautiful answers, that right there is the crux of the matter. Okay, let's get back to base. Now, one of Satan's successful strategies over the years has been to orchestrate circumstances in ways to inflict so much pain and suffering among us in contradiction to the character of God. Then he turns around and instigates us to blame God for the very pain and suffering he has caused. And boy, how hard we have fallen for this one. Now, history confirms that one of the cases where we see this routine manifest so glaringly is in the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. Now, while Jesus still walked the streets of Palestine, on one occasion while he left the temple in the company of his disciples, a conversation ensued with the disciples. They asked his opinion about the temple, and in response, he drops a bombshell in Matthew 24 verse 2, saying, Not one stone will be left on top another. That's not exactly what we expected, but okay. Now, much later, as Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives overlooking Jerusalem, while mortal eyes were preoccupied with the beautiful scenery and sophisticated architectural masterpiece of the temple, Jesus, in his foreknowledge, could oversee the avoidable pending doom looming over the city, and he broke down in tears, in frustration, wanting so desperately to save his people but could not. For God would not force himself against the will of his people. At this point, his disciples, wanting to know more, asked for clues to know when these things will be. At the point, they still thought that Jesus spoke about the end of the world and his second coming. Now, revealing to them according to their capacity, Jesus blends the two events in one: the destruction of Jerusalem and the end of the world. And in verse 15 of Matthew 24, Jesus leaves them a clue of what to look out for: the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel. Brother Luke brings more clarification, and he puts it this way: when you see Jerusalem being surrounded by enemies, it's about to go down. Let them that are in Judea flee to the mountains. Luke 21, verse 20 to 24. Now, about 35 years later, after this conversation, towards the end of the reign of Emperor Nero, a newly appointed Roman procurator to Judea, Gaius Florus, took a large amount of money from the temple treasury in Jerusalem. You wonder who orchestrated that? Your guess is as good as mine. Well, these and many other forms of abuse by the Romans resulted in the Jews revolting against the Roman Empire. In an attempt to cool this, Cestius Gallus and the Roman armies surrounded the city to quell the disorder. And somehow, in an unexpected move, when their attack seemed imminent, they just withdrew. The Jewish armies pursued them and they won a great victory. Now, later, two Roman generals, Vespasian and his son Titus, were sent to quash the revolt, and that they did, breaching the three walls, burning the temple, killing over 1 million Jews in the process, including children, women, and the helpless. Question: was this massacre avoidable? If yes, why then would God allow such atrocities against his own people, even if it was orchestrated by Satan? Question number 2. In extension, since God is all powerful and all things answer to him, why does he sometimes allow bad things to happen? Why not just stop it? These are great questions. Let's start with question number 2. Now, Hebrews 11:35 to 38 in Revelation 2 verse 10 confirm that not all stories have a happy ending here. We do not have all the pieces of the puzzles on this side of eternity to exhaust all the details of the why question. However, this is what we know: our God is able to save even to the uttermost. But if he ever allows an inconvenience here, it must be for a better good. How do I know that? Jeremiah 29 verse 11. For I know the plans that I have for you. They are to prosper you and not to cause you pain. Romans 8:28. For all things work together for good to them that love God. Someday we will have clarity, but for now we hold on. Now back to the first question: God literally sent them his prophets to pre-warn them, but they killed his prophets, would not listen to them. Now God came down himself in the person of Jesus and offered to help them. About 35 years prior, they still rejected him and crucified him, and instead said, "Let his blood be upon us and our children." Like we learned last week in Q2E1, one of the core fundamental principles of God's government is that God will not force himself on us. He will respect our choices, even if those choices come with unpleasant consequences. There was nothing more he could do. It broke his heart that they refused his help, making the pending doom inevitable. The same principle will apply when things wrap up here. Help refused is deliverance rejected. Point is, God is not to blame here. Now, even though they rejected him in his last bid to save them, he still gave them clues to look out for in order to escape the pending doom. Interestingly, all who listened and obeyed were able to escape the massacre unscathed. What to remember thus far? This massacre was avoidable. It only happened because the Jerusalemites would not do the needful. A. They lacked discernment, therefore, could neither acknowledge the pressing of Jesus, his prophets, nor take heed to the warnings and counsels that he brought them. B. In their continued refusal of the promptings of God, they so benumbed their spiritual sensitivities to the promptings of God that even the very obvious will pass by without recognition. The outcome was that the avoidable became their reality, even within their place of safety. The same principles apply today. Food for thought 1. Could we be repeating the same cycle today? What is God so desperately trying to communicate to us both on a personal and corporate level, in rebuke, in correction, or in order to avert a pending misfortune? Could it be possible that our dailies have become so loud that we can hardly hear God communicate to us? Think about it. Now, having failed in completely annihilating the people of God, the adversary has since resorted to a variety of strategies aimed at defacing the image of God in humanity. Our responsibility as co-workers with Jesus is to restore the image of God in humanity through acts of service, unselfish love, and commitment to meeting human needs, garnished with the good news of the gospel and the accompanying power of the Holy Spirit. This recipe will be as potent today as it was for the early Christians. In conclusion, food for thought number 2. If God depended on you, just you, for the well-being and eternal destiny of those within your sphere of influence since you became a Christian, would you consider yourself today as a profit-yielding venture or a loss? Don't tell me. Show God. Thank you for joining in today. Please kindly like, share, and subscribe. It's your Q2E2, doodling out. I'll see you next week. Happy Sabbath.